She thought it was a prank wedding, but what she didn't know was that every moment she spent at the altar would cost her more than she ever imagined. With eyes watching and cameras flashing, she was about to be trapped in a game she didn't agree to. Nothing will be cancelled. The smile on his face said it all. But what Victor didn't know, Jenna wasn't going to play by his rules. Not today. In a moment of power and betrayal, one woman will fight to break free from a contract she never signed, a marriage she didn't choose. But time is running out, and not everyone will make it out alive. Before we go on, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this story ends. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments and let us know what you think about the story so far. Trust me, you won't want to miss the next twist. She thought it was a prank. The kind of joke you laugh about for years, a harmless dare among friends. Jenna Williams stood at the altar, her breath shallow, eyes darting around the room. She could hear the soft chuckles of the guests, the way they shifted in their seats, waiting for the punchline. Victor Hargrave, the charming billionaire with a smile that could melt anyone's resolve, stood before her in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His eyes twinkled as he met her gaze, and for a moment, Jenna believed him. "Everything's just a joke," she whispered to herself, hoping it was true. The laughter in the room felt hollow, a nervous energy filling the grand ballroom. The polished marble floors, the gold accents of the chandeliers, it all seemed too real to be a joke. Jenna's heart raced as her hands trembled, clutching the bouquet tighter. She looked around, her eyes searching for the familiar faces of friends, her brother, anyone who might tell her this was just a setup. But there was no one. She heard the faint sound of Victor's voice, low and smooth, as he leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "Nothing will be cancelled." The words sent a shiver down her spine, a coldness creeping into her chest. This was no joke. This wasn't part of the plan. Jenna's world tilted. The laughter from the guests faded into the background, and all that remained was the unsettling silence of her own mind, racing to comprehend what was happening. A hidden fear started to form, twisting in the pit of her stomach. Victor's smile never faltered, his grip on her hand tightening just slightly. His voice, still so calm, so confident, sliced through the tension in the air. "This is happening. There's no turning back." The audience watched in stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. All Jenna could hear was the beating of her heart, loud and frantic, drowning out everything else. She opened her mouth to speak, to demand answers, but the words stuck in her throat. There was no escape. The doors were locked. The world outside was just a blur, and inside, it felt like everything was closing in. Victor's hand brushed against her cheek, his touch cold, his expression unreadable. "Let's make this official, Jenna." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She could barely breathe. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing tighter, suffocating. But she couldn't back out now, not in front of all these people. Not when everything was already in motion. Jenna swallowed hard, her thoughts racing. She had never felt so exposed, so helpless. And then, just as quickly as the silence had consumed the room, a voice spoke from the back. "Is this really happening?" A few whispers passed through the guests, but Victor's gaze never wavered. He didn't need to answer. The tension in the air thickened. Jenna wanted to scream, to run. But she couldn't. The ceremony continued. Her heart beat louder than ever. The life she knew was slipping away. The rest of the world outside was irrelevant. What mattered now was Victor, the man who'd just trapped her in a nightmare she couldn't wake from. As the officiant's voice rang out, asking if anyone objected, Jenna felt the weight of the room press down on her. The words were coming faster now, each one sealing her fate. A cold sweat coated her skin. The chandelier above glistened, its light casting strange shadows across the room. She thought it was a prank, but this was real, and now there was no turning back. The reception had barely started when Jenna was whisked away from the ballroom. Her feet moved on their own, carrying her through the dimly lit hallways of Victor's sprawling estate. She barely registered the smiles of guests or the clinking of champagne glasses as she was guided into a private office, far away from the prying eyes of the wedding party. Victor's estate felt more like a fortress than a home. The towering glass windows framed the city below, and Jenna felt as if she were miles away from the world she knew, trapped in a high-rise prison of wealth and coldness. She was ushered into a leather chair by Victor himself. His expression was unreadable, and for the first time, the charm that usually lit up his face was gone. "Sit," he said, his voice commanding yet oddly soft, like a predator preparing to strike. Jenna hesitated for a moment before sitting, her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't understand. What was happening? Victor moved to a large oak desk, his back turned to her as he reached for something. She could feel the tension building between them, thick and suffocating. He wasn't the man she thought she knew. She had been wrong about everything. He turned slowly, a set of papers in his hand. He dropped them onto the desk with a soft thud. "I'm sure you're wondering why you're here." His eyes locked onto hers. There was no warmth in them, just cold calculation. Jenna started. But her voice faltered. She couldn't seem to find the words. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together what had just happened in the ballroom. "You thought this was a joke," Victor interrupted smoothly. "I gave you a chance to back out earlier. You didn't take it." Her stomach sank. "What do you mean? What is all this?" Victor's lips curled into a slow smile, but there was nothing kind about it. "This isn't just about a wedding, Jenna. This is about business, and you've made a deal you can't get out of." Jenna stood up abruptly, her knees weak. "A deal? What kind of deal? I don't remember signing anything." "You didn't have to." He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he regarded her with unnerving calm. "Your father, your family, they've owed me for years. And now, you're going to repay that debt." Jenna's thoughts spiraled. "What debt? My father has nothing to do with this." Victor's smile grew colder. "Oh, but he does. You see, Jenna, your father was involved in a few ventures of mine many years ago. I've been patient, but now it's time to collect." Jenna stumbled back, her mind trying to process his words. Her father had never mentioned anything like this. "You're lying. My father wouldn't—" "I'm not lying," Victor cut her off sharply. "And your father wasn't given a choice. Neither were you." He placed a thick, signed document in front of her. "Sign this, and you'll get what's owed to me. If you don't, well, we'll see how long you last in a marriage that's as real as this one is." The room felt like it was closing in on her. The papers in front of her were not just some formality. They were chains, and signing them would make her a prisoner for the rest of her life. Jenna's hand trembled as she reached for the papers. She scanned the text, but nothing made sense. It was all legal jargon, clauses she didn't understand, numbers that made her dizzy. "You're sick," she whispered, staring at him in horror. This is insane." Victor's expression didn't shift. "No, Jenna. This is business. And it's the only way to make things right. You and your family are tangled in my world now. You'll have to accept that." Jenna's mind raced. She couldn't breathe. The weight of the situation was suffocating her. She had no family to turn to, no friends who could help her out of this. She stared at Victor, feeling the betrayal deep in her bones. He wasn't the man she thought she knew. He had been using her all along, pulling the strings, playing the long game. And now, she was trapped in his web. "You have a choice," he said, standing up from his chair and walking toward her. "Sign, and I'll make sure you live comfortably. Refuse, and you'll regret it." Jenna's pulse raced. The papers in front of her might as well have been a noose. With shaking hands, she pushed them away. "I won't do it," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I won't be your pawn." Victor paused for a moment, his eyes narrowing. There was a flicker of something dangerous behind them, but he didn't speak. Jenna turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Remember, Jenna," he said, his tone colder than ever. "You've made your bed. You'll sleep in it now." The door clicked shut behind her, and Jenna felt the weight of the world bearing down on her shoulders. The contract was only the beginning. She had no idea what Victor had planned for her next, but whatever it was, she wasn't going down without a fight. The battle had just begun. Jenna's world felt like it was unraveling faster than she could process. The quiet hum of the estate's lavish hallways seemed foreign now, empty and suffocating. She walked down the marble corridors, her thoughts racing, the weight of Victor's words pressing heavily on her chest. The walls, once comforting in their elegance, now seemed to close in on her. She needed an escape, but there was none. As Jenna entered her bedroom, she locked the door behind her, letting the tears fall freely for the first time. She had never felt more alone. Her father's betrayal, Victor's cold manipulation, the absurdity of her situation. It was too much to bear. She needed answers. She needed someone to fight for her. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table, breaking her thoughts. She wiped her face, quickly snatching the device. Jake. I'm on my way. Her heart skipped a beat. Her brother, her protector Jake Turner, her older brother and ex-Marine, had always been her rock. Ever since their parents had passed, Jake had taken on the role of guardian. He had been away for business, but something in his gut must have told him that she needed him. Jenna couldn't hold back her relief. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. But she knew it wouldn't be enough. She wasn't sure anyone could help her now, not when Victor had already made his move. She quickly replied to Jake, her hands shaking as she typed. Jenna, please hurry. I don't know what to do. Later that evening, the sound of a car pulling up outside her window brought a wave of calm mixed with anxiety. Jenna rushed downstairs to greet him, heart pounding. She opened the door, and there stood Jake, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim light of the driveway. His eyes locked with hers, full of concern. But behind them, she saw something else. Determination. Jenna, he said softly, pulling her into an embrace. What the hell is going on here? She didn't know where to start. The events of the day seemed too absurd to put into words, but she knew she had to tell him everything. She pulled away slightly and led him inside, where they could speak privately. I thought it was just a stupid prank wedding, Jenna began, her voice shaky as she recounted the events from earlier that day. Victor's cryptic words, and the contract he'd forced her to sign. But now, I'm stuck in this mess. He says my father owed him something, and I have to repay it by marrying him. Jake's face darkened as he listened. When she finished, he took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. I knew something was off when you called me, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I'm going to get you out of this, Jenna. We're not going to let Victor get away with this. Jenna nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude and fear at the same time. She trusted Jake with everything she had, but the depth of Victor's manipulation, the layers of corruption, it seemed insurmountable. But how? What can we do? She asked, her voice breaking. Victor controls everything. Money, the estate, the lawyers. My father's debt is just too big. Jake's eyes burned with determination. I've seen worse. I've been in worse situations. You don't fight someone like Victor by playing by the rules. You hit them where it hurts. Jenna looked at him, hoping his confidence wasn't misplaced, but the flicker of doubt in her mind lingered. Was there any way out of this? The following day, Jake wasted no time. He began investigating every angle he could think of. Victor's business dealings, his history with Jenna's family, and anything that could give them a foothold. Jenna stayed in her room, glued to her phone, staring at the legal documents Victor had made her sign, feeling the weight of it pressing on her. She knew that time was running out. Jake returned late that evening, his face more serious than she'd ever seen it. I've found something, he said, his voice grim. Jenna's heart skipped. What is it? Jake handed her a manila folder. Victor's empire isn't as untouchable as he thinks. There's a trail, money, corrupt deals, secret investments. Your father was involved in some shady businesses, but he's not the only one. I've found something that ties Victor to several high-profile cases of fraud and money laundering. If we play this right, we can bring him down. Jenna felt a rush of hope, but it was quickly replaced by uncertainty. But we need proof, Jake. We need something concrete. Jake nodded. We've got it. We're not going to back down. But just as things began to feel like they were turning in their favor, Jenna received a chilling phone call. It was from an unlisted number. She hesitated before answering. Jenna, a voice on the other end said, smooth and calculating. I think you've been misinformed. It was Victor's voice. Do you really think you can take me down? You think your brother's little investigation will work? You're out of your depth. Jenna's blood ran cold. What do you want? She managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. I want you to understand something, Victor continued, his voice a low whisper of danger. No one leaves me, not even you. And your brother? Well, let's just say he's walking a fine line. You both are. The call ended abruptly, leaving Jenna staring at her phone, a chill creeping over her skin. Jenna sat alone in the study, the folder Jake had handed her spread out in front of her like a puzzle she couldn't quite piece together. The pages were filled with documents, financial statements, transaction logs, correspondence. But the further she dug, the deeper the pit in her stomach grew. Each line, each number, revealed just how far Victor had his claws in everything. Every page screamed of corruption and deceit, and the trail seemed endless. Victor had tied her father's name to a web of illicit deals, and now Jenna was caught in the middle of it all. It wasn't just a wedding. It was the beginning of her life as his pawn in a game much bigger than she could have ever imagined. She sifted through the papers, her fingers trembling as she pieced together the full scope of Victor's empire. His investments in offshore accounts, his dealings with shady corporations, the illegal activities that spanned years, affecting not only her father but countless others. And her father's name, her father, the man she had always looked up to, whose integrity had been beyond reproach, was tangled in it all. It was too much. The realization that everything she had known, everything she believed in, had been tainted by this monster. Victor's manipulation wasn't just about the marriage. It was about silencing her family, making sure that no one ever questioned him. The more Jenna uncovered, the more she realized that her father's life, and her own, had been used to secure Victor's power. Her head swam with thoughts as she leaned back in the chair. She could hear Jake's voice from earlier, telling her they could take Victor down. But how? The evidence they had, while damning, wasn't enough to stand up to Victor's connections, his wealth, and his legal team. She was just a woman with a broken family and no options left. A sudden knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, barely able to keep the weariness from her voice. Jake entered, his face tight with frustration. "I need to talk to you." "About what?" Jenna asked, not looking up from the papers. She didn't have the energy to pretend everything was okay anymore. Jake closed the door behind him and walked over to the desk, sitting across from her. He reached for the folder, flipping through the pages with practiced ease. "Jenna," he began quietly, "you've been reading this all wrong." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Jake leaned forward, his eyes focused. "Victor's not just after you because of some family debt. This isn't about money. It's something far worse." Jenna's heart skipped a beat. She had already suspected as much, but hearing the words spoken aloud made the fear settle deep in her bones. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice low. Jake sighed, rubbing his face. "You're not the first person to try and take him down. Victor's made enemies, and he's buried them all. There's a reason why no one's ever dared cross him for long. He's not just rich, he's dangerous. And you, Jenna, you're not a pawn in his game. You're his target." Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean, I'm his target?" Jake's eyes hardened. "He's not trying to control you for money or power. He wants something from you, something more personal. You're caught in the middle of his plan, but what he really wants is you." Jenna recoiled, trying to process his words. "But why me? What could I possibly have that he wants?" Jake leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "He's not just after your family's wealth, Jenna. He's trying to control you because of who you are. You're the one thing standing between him and everything he wants. Your father was part of something he can't afford to let go, and you, Jenna, are the final piece of the puzzle." The realization hit Jenna like a slap across the face. It wasn't just a marriage. It wasn't just a prank. Victor wanted to own her, control her in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. And it wasn't just about her family anymore. It was about power, manipulation, and something darker. "Then we're completely screwed," Jenna whispered, her voice thick with disbelief. How can we fight that? How can I fight him if he's going to do this? Jake clenched his fists, his jaw tight. We start by finding a way to make him vulnerable. We use his own game against him. There's always a crack in the armor. We just need to find it. Jenna's eyes met his, the determination in them matching his own. For the first time since this nightmare began, Jenna felt the weight lift slightly. She wasn't alone anymore. They were in this together. But she knew this wasn't going to be easy. And there was still one question she couldn't shake. What would Victor do to her if he realized she was finally waking up to his plans? The next morning, Jenna stood at the window of her bedroom, staring out at the sprawling estate below. The view of the meticulously manicured gardens, the grand fountain in the distance, everything that once seemed like a symbol of wealth and success, now felt suffocating. She had been living in a gilded cage, and the bars were closing in tighter with each passing hour. She couldn't stop thinking about what Jake had told her. Victor wasn't just trying to control her because of her family's debt. It was something more personal, something darker, and she had no idea what to do with that knowledge. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Come in," she called out, turning toward the sound. To her surprise, it wasn't Jake who entered, but Vanessa Black. Jenna's stomach clenched at the sight of her. Vanessa, with her cool, calculating beauty and her perfect posture, exuded the kind of confidence that was almost infuriating. She was everything Jenna wasn't, everything Jenna couldn't ever be, and that only made her presence all the more unsettling. Vanessa smiled as she stepped inside, her eyes narrowing slightly as she surveyed the room. "I thought we might finally have a conversation, Jenna," she said, her voice silky and smooth, with just a hint of something cruel beneath the surface. Jenna's heart raced. She wasn't sure what Vanessa wanted, but she could feel the tension thickening in the air. She didn't trust her. Couldn't trust her. "What do you want?" Jenna asked, her voice sharp despite the growing unease in her chest. Vanessa's smile deepened, though there was no warmth in it. "Oh, come now. We're practically family now, aren't we? After all, you're marrying my fiancé." Jenna recoiled at the venom in her words. "Fiancé? Is that what you think this is?" Vanessa chuckled softly, as if amused by Jenna's lack of understanding. "Don't be naive, darling. You're just a temporary distraction. But don't worry, it's all part of the plan." Jenna's head swam with confusion. "What are you talking about? What plan?" Vanessa tilted her head slightly, as if considering how much to reveal. "Victor has big plans, Jenna. You don't realize it yet, but you're just a pawn in his game, a means to an end." Jenna felt a chill settle over her. She wanted to shout at Vanessa, to demand answers, but something about her calm demeanor, about the way she spoke as if this was all just inevitable, kept Jenna rooted in place. Vanessa's eyes glinted as she continued. "You see, Victor is a very strategic man. He plays the long game. Your family, your father, you, none of you matter in the grand scheme of things. It's all about securing control, and you, well, you'll serve your purpose." Jenna clenched her fists, trying to keep her voice steady. "You think this is just about me? You think I'm just going to roll over for him and let him ruin everything?" Vanessa raised an eyebrow, as if amused by Jenna's defiance. "Oh, darling, you don't have a choice. You never did." Jenna felt a wave of rage flood through her. She wanted to scream, to tell Vanessa exactly what she thought of her, but she knew it wouldn't make any difference. Vanessa was in control here, just like Victor. "I'm not afraid of you," Jenna spat, her voice firm despite the fear twisting in her stomach. "And I'm sure as hell not going to let you or Victor manipulate me any longer." Vanessa's smile widened, her lips curling into something far too satisfied. "Oh, I know you're not afraid. You're just in denial. But the truth will hit you eventually. You'll see. You'll all see." With that, Vanessa turned on her heel and walked out of the room, leaving Jenna alone with her thoughts. Jenna's mind raced as she processed what had just happened. Vanessa's words echoed in her ears. "You'll see." What was Victor's plan? And why was Vanessa so confident? Was it just about the marriage? Or was there something more? The next few days passed in a blur. Jenna spent hours combing through the documents Jake had found, trying to make sense of them. But no matter how many times she read through the papers, it all felt like a puzzle she couldn't solve. Each new piece of information made the picture more complex, more sinister. And then, something caught her eye. A name. Victor Hargrave had been involved in a series of high-level meetings and business deals, ones that involved massive sums of money that Jenna's father had helped secure, though it had been under the guise of legitimate investments. But these deals weren't above board. They were linked to offshore accounts, shell companies, and illegal practices. It was no longer just about a family debt. It was about Victor's control over everything her family had worked for. She looked up, her thoughts swirling. There had to be something she could do. There had to be a way to take him down. She couldn't let him win. She couldn't let him destroy everything. But there was still one question she couldn't answer. What was Victor's ultimate goal? What was he really after? The pieces were starting to fall into place, but Jenna was no closer to understanding what the endgame was. And the more she uncovered, the more she realized that the battle she was about to face was far bigger than anything she had ever imagined. The days that followed Vanessa's visit felt like a blur of tension and unanswered questions. Jenna found herself unable to escape the feeling that the walls were closing in. Every room in Victor's estate seemed colder than the last, and the once lavish hallways now felt like the corridors of a prison. But Jenna knew one thing. She wasn't going to let herself be trapped. She had to find a way out of this mess, to take control before Victor's manipulations crushed everything she had left. Her mind kept returning to Vanessa's cryptic words. "You're just a pawn in Victor's game." A pawn. It was hard to accept that she could be so easily discarded, but she could no longer afford to ignore the truth. Victor's plans had never been about love or marriage. This was about power, control, and something far more sinister. Jenna stood at the desk, the documents in front of her scattered like pieces of a puzzle she was struggling to solve. She flipped through the papers Jake had found, but something about them didn't sit right. There was something missing, something she hadn't been able to piece together. And then it hit her. It wasn't just about the money, the shady deals, or even her family's debts. There was another name she'd been glossing over: Vanessa Black. Vanessa's involvement in all of this seemed more than just that of a scorned lover. It felt calculated, as if her role in Victor's life wasn't just personal, but strategic. Jenna grabbed her phone, dialing Jake's number with urgency. The moment he picked up, she could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "Jake, I need you to dig deeper into Vanessa. I think she's more involved in this than we thought." "Jenna," Jake replied, his tone sharp. "We've gone over every angle. I don't think we've missed anything. But I'll look again. What's got you thinking about her?" "I'm not sure yet, but something doesn't add up. Victor's always been about control, but Vanessa, she's playing a part in this that goes beyond personal bitterness. I think she's in on something bigger." Jake was silent for a moment before responding. "All right, I'll get on it. Stay safe, sis. I'm not sure what's coming next, but it's not going to be easy." The call ended, and Jenna stared at the screen for a long moment. She knew Jake was right to be cautious, but she had to trust her instincts. If Vanessa was part of Victor's plan, then everything Jenna had been told about Victor's empire, about his manipulation, had to be questioned. That evening, Jenna found herself once again wandering the halls of the estate, her mind clouded with worry. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she needed to get out of her own head for a while. The weight of everything was overwhelming, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. As she passed by the study, she heard muffled voices. She froze, her heart rate quickening. She recognized one of the voices immediately. It was Victor. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to remain as silent as possible, straining to hear the conversation. "She's getting too close," Victor's voice hissed. "We need to take action before she figures out everything." Jenna's breath caught in her throat. What did he mean by that? "She's suspicious, but she doesn't know everything yet." Another voice, one she didn't recognize, replied. It sounded male, and its coldness sent a chill down her spine. "But we've got a problem. We can't let her escape this marriage. She has to sign the documents, Victor. If she doesn't, all of this could fall apart." Victor's response was colder, more calculated. "I'm aware. We'll make sure she stays in line. Vanessa's already set things in motion. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." The mention of Vanessa made Jenna's stomach turn. She leaned closer, her ears straining to catch more of the conversation, but all she could make out was a few unintelligible words. The only thing she could gather was that Victor wasn't just controlling her for her family's sake. This was about something deeper. And the more she listened, the more she realized how much danger she was in. The next day, Jake called her with news that made her blood run cold. "I've found something," Jake said, his voice grim. Vanessa isn't just connected to Victor through personal ties. She's been working with him on the business side for years. She's more involved in his operations than we thought. Jenna's mind raced as she processed the information. What does that mean? Is she helping him hide something? Jake hesitated before responding. She's the one who helped orchestrate the debt your father took on, and she's been pulling strings with Victor in the shadows. She's not just a mistress. She's been part of his empire this whole time. Jenna's hand trembled as she put the phone to her ear. But why would she do this? She already has Victor's attention. What else does she want? I'm not sure yet, Jake replied, frustration evident in his voice. But we need to find out. This isn't just about a wedding or money. Victor's power goes much deeper than that. And Vanessa, she's in the center of it all. Jenna hung up, her mind spinning. If Vanessa was more involved in Victor's operations than she had ever realized, then she had been playing her own game all along. But what did Vanessa stand to gain from all of this? And why was she so determined to control Jenna? With this new piece of the puzzle in place, Jenna knew one thing for sure. She couldn't trust anyone, especially not Victor or Vanessa. She was more alone than she had ever felt in her life. But this time, she wasn't going to back down. Victor thought he had her cornered, but she had a plan of her own now. And this time, it wasn't just about her family's debt. It was about getting her life back. The walls of the Hargrave estate felt suffocating as Jenna sat at the desk, papers scattered in front of her, none of them offering the clarity she desperately needed. Her mind buzzed with a million thoughts: her family's involvement, Vanessa's hidden role, Victor's manipulations, and now, a new, more terrifying realization. She was fighting not only for her freedom, but for her very survival. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Jake. "I've got an update," he said, his voice sounding more urgent than usual. "I need you to meet me at the lawyer's office. It's time we make our move." Jenna's pulse quickened. This was it. The moment they would either expose Victor or fall deeper into his trap. She grabbed her coat, barely registering the cold air that hit her skin as she left the estate and made her way to the lawyer's office. The office was quiet, almost too quiet, as Jenna and Jake sat across from the attorney. His name was Sam Fields, an experienced litigator with a reputation for handling high-profile cases. But today, his usual calm demeanor seemed tinged with concern. "We've looked through the documents, and there's no question about it," Sam said, leaning forward in his chair. "Victor is holding all the cards, and unless we can find a crack in his empire, this will be a very difficult case to win." Jenna's heart sank. "What do you mean, a crack?" She was desperate for a solution, for something to hold on to. Sam opened a thick file, laying it down on the table between them. "Victor Hargrave's empire is built on layers of secrecy. Most of the deals he's made are through shell companies, offshore accounts, and carefully crafted legal loopholes. He knows exactly how to cover his tracks." Jake clenched his jaw, frustration clear in his voice. "Then what do we do? We can't let him just win." Sam paused, flipping through more pages. "The only way to get to him is through the public. We need to bring his empire into the light. But it's going to take more than just legal maneuvering. We need evidence, something concrete, something that ties him to criminal activity directly." Jenna's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the table. "You're saying we need to expose him to the public? What if he destroys us first? He's got too many resources, too many ways to silence us." Sam's eyes softened. "I know it's a risk, but it's the only way. We go public, we show the world who he really is, and that's where we start. The more eyes on this, the harder it'll be for him to control the narrative. If we can build enough of a case, we'll have a shot at taking him down." Jake sat back, his mind clearly racing. "But where do we start? We don't even have enough to go public yet." Jenna swallowed hard. "We can't just wait. We need to find something, Anything that will tie him to a crime. It's the only way to make him back down. The rest of the meeting was a blur. Sam explained how they could subpoena certain documents, but they had to be careful. Victor's lawyers were sharks, and one wrong move could make them vulnerable. As Jenna and Jake left the office, the gravity of the situation set in. The legal battle had begun, but it was far from a simple fight. They were about to take on a man with the power to destroy them both. That night, Jenna lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened: the wedding, the contract, the suffocating hold Victor had on her life. The more she thought about it, the more she realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. It wasn't just about her marriage. It was about everything Victor had built on lies, on manipulation, on blood money. But there was something she wasn't seeing. Some connection, some piece of information she had missed. Something important that could bring Victor's entire world crashing down. The next day, as Jenna sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, her phone buzzed with a message from Jake. Jake. I found something. It's big. Meet me at the office. Her stomach turned. What had Jake uncovered? She could only imagine the lengths Victor had gone to hide his dealings, but Jake had a knack for finding the cracks in even the most solid walls. When Jenna arrived at Jake's office, she found him hunched over a stack of papers. His brow furrowed in concentration. As she sat down across from him, he looked up, his eyes bright with a mixture of excitement and caution. I found it, Jake said, almost breathless. Victor's empire isn't just about money. It's about power. There's a partnership, one that ties him to a much bigger player in the game. Someone who's been working in the shadows, helping him cover up his mess. It's a name we haven't even considered yet. Jenna leaned forward, her heart racing. Who is it? Jake handed her a folder, and as she flipped it open, she saw the name. Lucas Navarro. Her breath caught in her throat. Lucas Navarro? The CEO of Navarro Global? Jake nodded. The same. Victor's been working with him for years, laundering money, securing investments. But Navarro has ties to more than just business. He's connected to organized crime, illegal trades, everything. If we can prove their connection, it'll destroy everything Victor has built. Jenna's mind raced. How do we prove it? Jake smiled grimly. We start with Navarro's assets. There's a paper trail we can follow, and I think we can link him directly to Victor's operations. This is the opening we've been waiting for. Jenna's mind was a whirlwind as she left Jake's office. The name Lucas Navarro echoed in her thoughts, a beacon of both hope and danger. She had been fighting for control of her life for what felt like an eternity. But now, with this new revelation, the stakes were higher than ever. Victor had ties to someone far more dangerous than she had ever anticipated. Someone whose reach extended into dark places. They had a new target now, a new avenue of attack. But they still needed the proof, the evidence. Without it, they were just a pair of siblings taking on a billionaire with too many resources. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, research, and strategizing. Jake had dug deep into Lucas Navarro's history, uncovering a web of illegal dealings that spanned across continents. It was like opening a door to a labyrinth of corruption. But still, no concrete evidence that could directly link him to Victor's empire. Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. There had to be a connection, something more obvious. She had been in the same room as Victor so many times. He must have left a trail. But where? That night, while Jake was poring over files, Jenna took a walk around the estate. She needed space. As she walked through the sprawling gardens, the cool evening air biting at her skin, she thought about everything that had led her here. The wedding, the contract, the quiet, insidious control Victor had over every part of her life. The fear that had consumed her was now replaced by a cold, steady resolve. She was done being his pawn. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jake. Jake, I need you. Now. Her heart skipped a beat. When Jenna arrived back at Jake's office, she found him pacing in front of the desk, looking both frustrated and relieved. I've got something, Jake said, voice tight with anticipation. It's a breakthrough. I found something in one of Navarro's offshore accounts, something that ties him directly to Victor. This could be it, Jenna. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. What did you find? Jake handed her a tablet, showing a digital trail of transactions. A name kept appearing: Hargrave Industries. It wasn't just the business dealings between Victor and Navarro, it was deeper. There were wire transfers, offshore accounts, investments made by Victor under fake names, all funneled through Navarro's networks. It was like a secret partnership built on hidden layers, each one more dangerous than the last. "These transactions go back for years," Jake said. "But this is the smoking gun. If we can get this into the right hands, if we can prove the connection, we can tear Victor's empire down." Jenna looked at the screen, the weight of it settling over her like a heavy cloak. It was undeniable. This was the evidence they had been searching for. This was their opening. "I'm going to the press," Jenna said, the words feeling like a declaration. "This has to go public." "We can't wait any longer." Jake frowned, his tone cautious. "We can't go public yet, not without securing a lawyer first. We need to make sure this isn't going to backfire. If we move too quickly, Victor will bury us." "I don't care," Jenna said, her voice firm. "This is bigger than us, Jake. People need to know what he's done. I need to end this." Jake stared at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I'm with you. But we do this carefully. We'll give it to the right journalist, one who won't back down, and we make sure Victor doesn't know we're coming." The next morning, Jenna and Jake met with Laura Fitzgerald, an investigative journalist known for uncovering corporate corruption and political scandals. Laura was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her early 40s, with a reputation for making powerful enemies and exposing the truth. When she saw the evidence Jake had gathered, her eyes lit up with determination. "This is huge," Laura said, scrolling through the files on her laptop. "If I can verify this, it'll be a game-changer. Victor Hargrave and Lucas Navarro? This is exactly the kind of story that could bring them down. But this is dangerous, Jenna. Are you sure you want to go public with this?" Jenna's response was immediate. "I'm sure. I've been manipulated, controlled, and used by Victor for too long. It's time for him to pay for what he's done." Laura nodded, a slight smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "All right then. We'll go for it. But we do this my way. You'll stay out of the public eye for now. I'll handle the press. The world doesn't need to know who you are yet." Over the next few days, Laura worked behind the scenes to prepare the story. Gathering more information, corroborating the evidence with financial experts, and preparing the pieces for a big reveal. Jenna and Jake stayed on edge, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then, one evening, as Jenna sat in her room, she received an unexpected call. It was from Victor. "Jenna." His voice was smooth, calculating. "I know what you've been doing. I see you're trying to play a dangerous game. But let me make this clear. You will not win. You have no idea who you're messing with." Her heart raced. "What do you want, Victor? You think you can expose me? You think you can tear down everything I've built?" His voice dropped lower, a hint of menace creeping in. "You have no idea what I'm capable of. Stay in line, Jenna. You won't like the consequences if you don't." Jenna stood up, her pulse pounding in her ears. "You've underestimated me for too long. This ends now, Victor." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, Jenna thought he might hang up, but then he spoke, his voice cold and final. "We'll see, Jenna. We'll see." The line went dead. The weeks following their meeting with Laura Fitzgerald were a blur of late nights and tense moments. Jenna and Jake spent every waking hour preparing for the storm that was about to break. Laura had been working tirelessly, verifying the evidence, cross-referencing the financial trails, and coordinating with her sources to ensure the story would hit the press at the right moment. Jenna could feel the weight of it all on her shoulders, but she also felt the fire in her chest, the need to finally take control, to show Victor that she wasn't afraid anymore. Yet, despite the mounting anticipation, a nagging fear gnawed at her. Victor's call still echoed in her mind. His words were a threat, a chilling promise that no matter how hard she fought, he would always be one step ahead. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized how little she truly knew about him. Victor was a master manipulator, and the damage he'd caused was far-reaching. He had woven a web so complex that even now, Jenna didn't fully understand how many lives had been destroyed in his wake. The things he had done to her family, to her father, and to everyone around him were unfathomable. But no more. That night, Jenna stood in front of her mirror, her reflection staring back at her with eyes that were tired but unyielding. She had spent so long playing the part of the helpless victim. No more. Tonight, everything changed. She received another message from Laura. "It's time. Tomorrow morning we're going public. Get ready." Jenna felt her heart hammer in her chest. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for was finally here. The following morning, Jenna woke early. The sun had barely risen, but the anticipation in her chest was enough to keep her awake. She met Jake in the kitchen, his expression serious as he poured himself a cup of coffee. "How are you holding up?" he asked, concern in his voice. Jenna nodded, though she knew her own anxiety was visible. "I'm ready. I have to be." Jake sat down across from her. "Remember, this is the first step. The press will pick up the story, but we need to be prepared for Victor to strike back. He won't go down quietly." Jenna's hands tightened around the cup of coffee in front of her. "I know, but I'm done being afraid." By the time the story hit the news, it was already spreading like wildfire. Laura's piece, "The Empire Built on Lies, How Victor Hargrave and Lucas Navarro's Corruption Unraveled," was everywhere. It was bold, detailed, and damning. The article outlined Victor's illegal dealings, his connections to Navarro, and the manipulation of Jenna's family. The evidence was irrefutable, and the world now had a clear view of the man behind the mask. But it wasn't just the public that took notice. The calls began almost immediately. Media outlets flooded Jenna's phone, eager to get her side of the story. Interviews were scheduled. Lawyers contacted her, offering their services. The backlash against Victor was swift and intense, but Jenna knew it was just the beginning. The world was watching, and she had to stay strong. The first press conference was scheduled for the following afternoon. Jenna stood in front of the mirror once more, adjusting the simple black dress she had chosen for the event. She wasn't interested in looking polished or perfect. She just needed to be seen. She needed people to see the real her, the woman who had fought back. Jake entered the room, his eyes scanning her briefly before he spoke. "You've got this, Jenna. I'm proud of you." She smiled faintly, though the tension in her chest didn't dissipate. "I'm just getting started." The press conference was a whirlwind. Camera flashes went off like lightning, reporters shouted questions, and every word Jenna spoke felt like it carried the weight of the world. She recounted the story in her own words, the manipulation, the lies, the contract, and the dark truth behind Victor Hargrave's empire. Every answer she gave was measured, controlled, but inside, she was shaking. Victor had been watching from the sidelines, and she knew he wouldn't sit idly by while she exposed him. As she spoke, she could feel the weight of his presence, even from a distance. He was always 2 steps ahead, and every second she spent in the spotlight was another moment where he could strike. But she didn't care anymore. The damage was done. The world knew who he was, and it was his turn to face the consequences. That evening, as Jenna sat in the quiet of her room, she received another call from Victor. Her heart sank as she saw his name flash on the screen, but she answered it anyway. "Jenna." Victor's voice was calm, almost too calm. "You've made your move. You've exposed the truth. And I'm sure you're feeling proud of yourself." Jenna's grip on the phone tightened. "I'm done being your puppet, Victor. This ends now." Victor's chuckle sent a chill down her spine. "You think you've won? You've just made a very dangerous enemy, Jenna. You've exposed a small part of the empire, but there's more. Much more. You have no idea what you're really up against." Jenna's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to stay steady. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Victor's tone shifted, darkening. "You should be." The line went dead. The following days brought more media attention, more interviews, and more pressure. But despite the victory of exposing Victor, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. She had only scratched the surface. Victor wasn't just going to walk away. He wasn't the kind of man who lost without a fight. As the days wore on, Jenna's fears began to take shape. She received anonymous threats, warnings that if she didn't stop, If she didn't back down, the consequences would be severe. The stakes had been raised, and Victor wasn't just going to stand by and let his empire fall. He would do anything to protect his wealth, his power. And in the silence of her room, as the weight of the world pressed in on her, Jenna realized just how far Victor would go to destroy her. Jenna sat in the dimly lit room, her phone in hand as the latest news broadcast played on the television. The headlines screamed Victor Hargrave's name, his empire unraveling at the seams, but the victory she had once felt now seemed distant. She had done what she set out to do. She had exposed him, but the battle was far from over. Each minute that passed felt heavier than the last. The threats she had received in the past few days had escalated. Some were anonymous phone calls, others came as carefully worded letters left at her doorstep, and one, in particular, was a chilling message sent via email. "You'll regret this, Jenna. No one crosses me and survives." Victor wasn't going to let her tear down everything he'd built. She knew that now. He was a force of nature, ruthless and calculating, and she had no doubt that he would use every resource at his disposal to make sure she paid for exposing him. Jake entered the room, his face tight with concern. "Jenna, we need to talk." She looked up, her eyes weary. "I know, Jake. I feel like I'm running out of time." "He's not just going to sit back and let this slide. He's planning something, I can feel it." Jake crossed the room and sat beside her, his expression grave. "I've been digging deeper, and I found something that could change everything." Her heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" He handed her a folder, and as she opened it, she felt a wave of disbelief. Inside were documents, official records detailing transactions, secret meetings, and a long list of names, some of them familiar, others completely unknown. But what caught her eye was one document in particular, a set of emails between Victor Hargrave and none other than Lucas Navarro. Jenna's fingers trembled as she scanned the emails, each one more damning than the last. They weren't just business deals. They were communications about laundering money through shell companies, corrupt partnerships with government officials, and, most chilling of all, plans to silence anyone who threatened their empire. The word eliminate appeared more than once. This is everything," Jenna whispered, her voice hoarse. "This is the smoking gun we need to take them both down." Jake nodded, his face set in determination. "This is it. If we can get this in front of the right people, if we can prove that Victor and Navarro are involved in organized crime on this scale, it's game over for both of them. But we have to be careful. If they catch wind of this, it'll be even worse." Jenna closed the folder slowly, her thoughts swirling. "We can't just sit on this. We need to go public again, get this information to the right authorities before they can bury it." Jake's eyes hardened. "It's dangerous, but it's the only way. We have to hit them fast and hard." The following days were a blur of planning, calls with Laura, and setting up meetings with legal experts and journalists who could help verify the new evidence. But every moment, every decision felt like it could be their last. Victor was watching, waiting, and Jenna could feel the pressure mounting. The deeper she dug, the more she realized just how dangerous this fight had become. But there was no turning back now. She was all in. It was the evening before they were set to make the next move, and Jenna couldn't sleep. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on her chest. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of legal battles, media exposure, and threats. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but she couldn't stop now. Not when she was so close. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling her from her thoughts. It was an unknown number, but something about it made her hesitate. She had been getting threats for days, but this felt different. She answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hello?" "Jenna." The voice on the other end was low, but unmistakably familiar. "Victor." Jenna's stomach dropped. "What do you want?" His voice was smooth, calm. "I'm giving you one last chance to back out. You think you've won, but you've only started a war you can't possibly finish. You think you can tear down everything I've built? You're just one small part of something much bigger. You have no idea what you're really up against." Jenna's grip tightened around the phone. "I'm not backing down. I've exposed you for who you really are. The world knows what you've done." Victor's voice became colder, more menacing. "You're wrong, Jenna. The world doesn't know the whole truth. And if you push me, if you continue down this path, I'll make sure you regret it. I'll ruin you, your name, your family, everything you care about. It'll all be gone." She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. You can't intimidate me. You've already lost." Victor's silence on the other end was chilling. Then, in a voice so low it barely registered, he whispered, "We'll see about that." The line went dead. Jenna's heart raced, the finality of Victor's words settling in. She had crossed a line now. There was no going back. Victor had threatened her before, but this felt different. He was done playing games. This was no longer just about exposing him. It was about survival. But Jenna was no longer afraid. If Victor wanted a war, she would give him one. The battle had shifted. Now, it wasn't just about exposing him. It was about taking him down. And she would fight until the very end, no matter the cost. The air was thick with tension. The city outside was buzzing with the kind of quiet before the storm. Jenna had never felt more aware of how quickly things could spiral out of control. The press had caught wind of the story, but it hadn't yet hit the mass media. The legal teams were preparing their defense, and the first step in their battle for justice was already in motion. Jenna and Jake had spent the last few hours reviewing every document, preparing for their next big move. But Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Something in the back of her mind told her they weren't as prepared as they thought. She had spent so much time focusing on Victor and his empire. But now, with the evidence she had, she realized there was one person she had underestimated all along: Vanessa. The phone buzzed again, pulling Jenna from her thoughts. It was a message from Laura, the journalist they had been working with. "Meeting at 8 p.m. Everything's set. Be ready." Jenna nodded, taking a deep breath. This was it. Tonight, they were going public. They were going to expose the final pieces of the puzzle. But as she put down the phone, she saw it. A message from an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. "If you want the truth about Victor, meet me at the old warehouse on Pierce Street. 10 p.m. Don't bring anyone. If you care about your brother's safety, you'll come alone." Jenna's heart skipped a beat. It was a threat. She knew that, but there was something else. The tone. It wasn't from Victor. It wasn't even a threat from someone she recognized. It was like someone was playing a different game, one that Jenna wasn't even aware of. Her pulse quickened. She stared at the message, her mind racing. She couldn't ignore it. It felt like a trap, but if there was any chance that it could help them bring Victor down, she had to take it. Her hand hovered over the phone for a moment, and then, with a deep breath, she texted Jake. "Something's off. I'm going to go to Pierce Street tonight. Stay close, but don't come with me. I need to hear what they have to say." Jake's reply was instant. "Don't do this, Jenna. We don't know who this is. It could be a setup." But Jenna was already making up her mind. "I have to. If it's a setup, I'll handle it." She pressed send, her stomach sinking as she realized what she was about to do. The old warehouse on Pierce Street was nearly abandoned, surrounded by overgrown weeds and crumbling buildings. The night was dark, and the cold wind swept through the narrow alleys. Jenna stepped out of the car, her heart thudding in her chest as she surveyed the area. There were no other cars parked, no sign of movement, nothing to indicate anyone was waiting for her. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. She moved cautiously toward the entrance, every step echoing in the empty street. The warehouse door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust. The faint glow of a single light bulb flickered overhead. The place was abandoned, except for one person standing in the center of the room. It was Vanessa. Jenna froze, her heart pounding as she looked at the woman standing there. Her posture relaxed, but the look in her eyes cold. "You," Jenna said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You set me up." Vanessa smiled, her expression almost predatory. "I told you, darling. You didn't know how you were really up against. You still don't." Jenna's mind raced, the realization hitting her like a punch to the gut. Vanessa. She had been playing both sides all along. She wasn't just Victor's ex. She was his accomplice, his partner in crime. "You don't get to do this," Jenna snapped. "You've ruined everything, my family, my life. And now, you think you can just walk in and finish this?" Vanessa stepped forward, her heels clicking against the cold concrete floor. "You think this is about you? You're not even the most important piece of this puzzle, Jenna. Victor isn't the one pulling all the strings. He's a pawn in a much bigger game, and you're the last piece I need to finish it." Jenna's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa's smile widened, a wicked gleam in her eyes. "You really thought you could expose everything and get away with it? You think anyone gets away with crossing Victor Hargrave? No, darling. There are far more powerful people involved in this than you could ever imagine, and you've just made yourself a target." Jenna's thoughts spun as she struggled to process the betrayal. Vanessa, the woman who had been playing the role of a lover scorned, was the mastermind behind it all. She had used Victor to get what she wanted, and now she was tying up the loose ends. Vanessa continued, her voice low and dangerous. "You thought you were going to expose Victor and destroy everything he built. But all you've done is expose yourself." The tension in the room was palpable. Jenna's hands clenched into fists. "You've been using me all along. This whole time you've been playing me." Vanessa shrugged nonchalantly. "It wasn't personal. It was just business. Now let me give you a bit of advice, Jenna. You can't fight someone like Victor, someone like us, and expect to win. You're outmatched, outgunned, and now you're out of time." Before Jenna could react, the sound of a car door slamming outside interrupted their conversation. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward the door, and for a split second, there was something like fear in her gaze. Jenna turned, her mind still racing, as a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Victor. Jenna's heart raced as she stood frozen in the dim light of the warehouse. Victor stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding the room. The air felt thick with the weight of betrayal and impending danger. Vanessa, for once, appeared uneasy, her confident facade slipping as she glanced at Victor. "I told you we couldn't let her go any further," Vanessa muttered, almost apologetically. Victor's gaze shifted between Vanessa and Jenna, his expression cold and unreadable. "You should have listened to me," he said, his voice smooth yet edged with a hint of menace. "You had a chance to leave this game. Now, you're part of it whether you like it or not." Jenna felt a wave of cold dread wash over her. Her mind was racing. This was it, the moment of truth. She had thought she was in control, thought she had uncovered enough to bring him down, but standing here now, facing Victor and Vanessa, she realized how far from ready she truly was. "I'm not going anywhere," Jenna said, her voice shaking but defiant. She squared her shoulders, fighting to stand tall. "You can't control me anymore." Victor's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Control? You think this is about control?" His eyes flicked over to Vanessa, who looked more tense than usual. "No, Jenna. This is about survival. We're just cleaning up the mess you started." Jenna's thoughts raced as she considered her options. The door was behind her, but Victor and Vanessa blocked her path. There was no easy escape, no quick fix. But there was one thing she knew for sure. She wasn't going down without a fight. "I'll fight you," Jenna said, her words sharper now. "I won't just lie down and let you destroy me, or my family. You don't get to win." Victor chuckled, a low, almost menacing sound that echoed through the warehouse. "Oh, I think I already have, Jenna." He stepped closer, his voice lowering to a near whisper. "You think you've been playing me, but you were always the pawn. You still are." Vanessa nodded slightly, her gaze turning steely. "It's over. You've lost." The finality of those words sent a cold chill down Jenna's spine. She looked at both of them, feeling the walls close in. But there was something in her that refused to yield. She had uncovered the truth. She had fought for her family's name. She wasn't about to let Victor win now. "You're wrong," Jenna said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve. "I know what you've done. I know who you really are. The world will know the truth. You can't stop it. You've already lost." Victor's face twisted with contempt, and before she knew it, he was standing inches from her. His breath was cold against her skin, his eyes dark with malice. "I can do anything I want," he hissed, his voice low. "You think your little story in the press will stop me? You think some journalist is going to bring me down? I built this empire, Jenna. I can tear you apart without a second thought." Jenna's chest tightened as she looked up at him, the weight of his words sinking in. He was right about one thing. He was powerful. He could destroy everything in an instant. But she had come too far to back down now. Suddenly, a noise at the door interrupted the tense moment. A loud, forceful knock echoed through the warehouse, followed by the sound of a door swinging open. The figure that entered stopped in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light from outside. "Not so fast, Victor," came a familiar voice. Jenna's heart leapt in her chest as she saw Jake, standing in the doorway, his expression fierce. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a man in a suit. A lawyer, Jenna realized, though she didn't recognize him. "What the hell is this?" Victor spat, his posture stiffening as he looked at Jake. "This," Jake said calmly, "is the end of the road for you." Jenna's breath caught in her throat as Jake stepped forward, the lawyer beside him handing Victor a stack of papers. "You've been under investigation for months," Jake continued. "We've gathered everything we need to bring you down, and I've got more than just public opinion behind me now. You're done." Victor's face darkened as he took the papers in his hand, his fingers twitching in barely concealed rage. He glanced at Vanessa, his eyes blazing. "You told me this wouldn't happen." "You said she wouldn't be able to do this." Vanessa stood still, her expression unreadable. I didn't know," she muttered, her voice uncertain. But the guilt was clear in her eyes. Vanessa had been playing both sides all along, and now she was realizing just how badly she'd underestimated Jenna. Jake turned to Jenna, offering her a reassuring nod. "It's over, Jenna. They can't escape this. You've got the evidence. We've got the law on our side now." Jenna felt a mixture of exhaustion and triumph flood through her. She had done it. Against all odds, she had brought Victor and his empire to its knees. She couldn't quite believe it, but the documents Jake had just handed to Victor were irrefutable. He had nowhere to hide now. Victor's glare never wavered, his anger simmering beneath the surface. "This isn't over," he growled. "You think you've won? You're nothing more than a nuisance, and I'll make sure you regret this." But as he spoke, Jenna saw something she hadn't expected. Uncertainty. Victor Hargrave, this man who had controlled everything for so long, was afraid. For the first time in her life, Jenna didn't feel like the victim anymore. She wasn't scared of him. She wasn't scared of anyone. "Go ahead," Jenna said, her voice steady. "Try to make me regret it, because no matter what you do, the truth is out, and you can't control that." Jake stepped forward, ready to take the next steps to ensure Victor's downfall, and the lawyer behind him spoke up. "The authorities have already been contacted. You won't be able to hide from this, Victor." Victor's face twisted in frustration, but he said nothing more. The power that he had wielded so effortlessly for years was slipping away from him. The days that followed Victor's confrontation were a whirlwind. Jenna and Jake had done the unthinkable. They had taken down one of the most powerful men in the city. But Victor was no ordinary adversary. Despite the mounting evidence against him, despite the public outcry and the legal battle that had only just begun, there was still a sense of looming danger. Victor wasn't someone who could be easily beaten. He had made too many connections, built too many alliances. As much as Jenna wanted to believe that this was the end, her gut told her it wasn't. She sat in her living room, scrolling through the latest headlines. The story had gone global. There were even calls for the government to investigate the depth of Victor's connections. But as satisfying as it was to see his empire crumble, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the first step. "Jenna." Jake's voice broke through her thoughts. She looked up to see him standing at the door, his expression grim. "We've got a problem." Jenna's heart dropped. "What is it?" Jake walked in, holding a piece of paper, his eyes shadowed with concern. "Victor's been released from custody. The charges against him haven't stuck. Somehow he's managed to use his influence to get out on bail. Jenna felt a sickening twist in her stomach. What? How is that possible? We have everything on him. The transactions, the accounts, the emails. Jake nodded, frustration in his voice. I know, but he's got the best lawyers money can buy, and they've managed to find enough legal loopholes to get him out. At least for now. Jenna stood up, pacing the room. This isn't over. He'll find a way to retaliate. He always does. Jake's voice softened. I think we both know Victor won't let this go. We need to be prepared for what comes next. The next few days were a blur of meetings with lawyers, discussions with media outlets, and attempts to track down any new information on Victor's movements. But the sense of impending danger was always there, gnawing at the back of Jenna's mind. She had exposed him, but now, in the wake of that victory, the question remained. What would Victor do next? Jenna sat at her desk late one evening, working through some new leads Jake had found, when the sound of her phone ringing startled her. She checked the number. It was unknown, but she answered anyway. Jenna, came the voice on the other end. It was Victor's. Her blood ran cold at the sound of his voice. I hope you're enjoying the headlines, darling, because they'll be the last ones you see. Jenna's grip tightened on the phone, but she forced herself to speak calmly. What do you want, Victor? His laugh was cold and taunting. What do I want? You really think you've won, don't you? You think you've exposed me? You're nothing but a small obstacle in a game much bigger than you. You have no idea what's coming next. Jenna's mind raced. You can't silence me anymore. The truth is out. It's too late. Victor's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. You think it's over? You think this is just about exposing me? No, Jenna. This is personal. And I'm just getting started. You've made me a target. And now, you'll pay the price for your little victory. Jenna's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground. You're desperate. You won't win this fight. Victor's response was a low chuckle. We'll see, darling. We'll see. The line went dead. For the next few days, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The threats had escalated, and she knew that Victor wasn't bluffing. As much as she tried to keep her composure, there was a nagging fear in the back of her mind. What was Victor planning? What lengths would he go to now that he was cornered? Jake stayed by her side, as he always had. He was monitoring Victor's movements, speaking with trusted contacts, and trying to get a sense of what was coming next. But even Jake, with all his experience, couldn't predict what Victor would do. Jenna, we need to be ready for anything, Jake said one evening, his voice serious. Victor will try to hit us where it hurts. He's not going to let this slide. But we have the truth on our side. That's our biggest weapon. Jenna nodded, her mind still reeling from the conversation with Victor. I know, but I feel like we're running out of time. The closer we get to taking him down, the more dangerous he becomes. Jake's expression softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. I'll make sure nothing happens to you. We're in this together, remember? Jenna tried to smile, but the weight of everything that had happened, and everything that still could, hung heavy in her chest. I know. I just don't want to lose anyone else. Jake didn't respond immediately, but his grip tightened on her shoulder, offering the silent reassurance she so desperately needed. The day they'd been preparing for arrived sooner than expected. A press conference had been scheduled, where Jenna would stand before the world once more, recounting the details of Victor's empire, his crimes, and his manipulation. But as the time approached, the phone calls came in. Anonymous threats, messages left on her doorstep, and even more chilling warnings. Victor wasn't just going to sit back anymore. He was making his move. The night before the press conference, Jenna sat in her room, the same folder of evidence in front of her. But now it felt heavier, more dangerous. She was about to take her final stand, one last chance to bring Victor down once and for all. The next morning, Jenna arrived at the press conference with Jake by her side. The room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing as she stepped up to the podium. The weight of the world felt heavier than ever as she stood before the microphones, ready to share the truth once and for all. As the questions began, Jenna felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the fear, the anger, the determination that had carried her this far. She had exposed Victor's empire. But now, it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. The press conference was just the beginning. This time, Jenna wasn't going to be the one running from the fight. This time, Victor would have nowhere to hide. The press conference had come and gone, the world now aware of Victor Hargrave's criminal empire. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media coverage, and the aftermath of what felt like a war that had only just ended. Jenna had exposed the truth, but as expected, Victor didn't go down without a fight. However, despite all the chaos and danger that had surrounded her, there was one thing Jenna knew for sure. She had survived, and in doing so, she had taken down a man who once seemed invincible. Jenna sat in the small cafe where she and Jake had gone to after the press conference, finally allowing herself a breath of relief. The weight she'd carried for so long had begun to lift, though the scars from the battle would remain for a while. "You did it," Jake said, his voice filled with pride as he raised his coffee cup toward her. "We did it." Jenna smiled softly, the familiar taste of victory sweeter than she could have imagined. "We did. But it wasn't just me. It was everyone who stood by me. You, Laura, the people who believed in the truth." Jake nodded, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that hadn't quite left. "Victor's going to be locked up for a long time. But there's still the Navarro connection. We can't forget that. His empire might have crumbled, but the remnants are still out there." Jenna felt a twinge of unease at the mention of Lucas Navarro. Despite their victory, she knew that the war wasn't truly over. Victor might have been taken down, but his empire had far-reaching tentacles, and Navarro was still a threat. "I know," she said, her voice steady. "But we've done something incredible, Jake. We've shown that even the most powerful people can be brought down. And that's not nothing." Jake met her gaze, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. "We'll keep fighting. But for now, we've earned a little peace." Jenna nodded, letting out a long breath. The truth was, she had never wanted peace more. After months of turmoil, she was finally starting to feel like she could breathe again. The following months brought change. The legal proceedings against Victor moved swiftly, thanks to the overwhelming evidence Jenna had uncovered. The case went to trial, and with every document and witness that was called, Victor's downfall became inevitable. He was sentenced to a long prison term, his empire shattered beyond repair. As for Lucas Navarro, he became the next target. Jenna's fight was far from over, but with the support of her legal team and the media behind her, Navarro's time was coming. One battle had ended, but there would be others. But as Jenna looked out at the city skyline from her apartment, she realized she had reclaimed her life. For the first time in a long time, she was free. Not just from Victor, but from the fear that had gripped her every day. A few months later, Jenna stood at the front of a small gathering in a community center. She had been invited to speak at an event for women who had experienced abuse, manipulation, and betrayal. The room was filled with people who understood her pain, and as she took the stage, she felt the weight of her journey, a journey that had taken her from victim to survivor. "I spent a long time running," Jenna began, her voice steady and strong. "Running from my past, running from the truth. But what I've learned is that the only way to stop running is to face it head on, to expose the truth, no matter how painful it may be." The room was silent, every eye on her, and for the first time in a long time, Jenna felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Victor Hargrave tried to control my life. He thought he could silence me, break me. But I fought back. I fought not just for myself, but for the people he hurt, and in the end, the truth came out." She paused, taking a breath, feeling the power of her words resonate in the room. "And now, I'm not just fighting for me. I'm fighting for all of us. For anyone who's ever been silenced. For anyone who's ever felt powerless. We can take back control. We can reclaim our lives. And we can make sure the truth always comes to light." The room erupted in applause, and Jenna smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. This, she realized, was her purpose. Not just to survive, but to help others do the same. Months passed, and while the battle against Navarro continued, Jenna had found a new purpose in life. She started working with charities focused on empowering women, supporting survivors of abuse, and helping people rebuild their lives after they had been torn apart by betrayal. She knew the fight wasn't over. She knew that there were still shadows lurking in the world, still powerful figures who thought they could control others with money and fear. But Jenna had learned that even the most powerful men could be brought to their knees. She had learned that the truth was the strongest weapon. And as she stood there, surrounded by people who had once been as lost as she had, Jenna knew that she was ready for whatever came next. The sun set behind the city, casting a warm glow over the horizon. Jenna stood by her window, looking out at the skyline, feeling a sense of calm she had never known before. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The war had been long and difficult, but she had come out stronger, more determined than ever. And as she watched the world below, Jenna knew that no matter what came next, she would face it head on. No more running, no more fear. The truth had set her free.